This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Simon Marks.
I am in for Rachel Johnson tonight. Nick Abbott just 2 hours away with the continuing A to Z of 2025. Now, this hour...
Post office clerks put up signs saying position closed. And secretaries turn off typewriters and put on their coats. And janitors padlock the gates for security guards to patrol. And bachelors phone up their friends for a drink while the married ones turn on a chat show.
If you know, you know. That is Amitri, one of Scotland's greatest ever musical exports, a brilliant band that I happen to love. They burst to prominence in the 1980s, and that song, Nothing Ever Happens, has particular relevance this year because it warns of the risks of history repeating itself. But the reason I'm playing it to you is because Amitri's lead singer and co-founder, Justin Currie, this year published an absolutely brilliant book. I think it's the best thing I've read all year. It's called The Tremolo Diaries, and it's all about his life on the road in the year after he first became aware that he had contracted Parkinson's disease. It is an extraordinary read, and earlier this week, before my voice deserted me, I went to Edinburgh and I talked to him.
Justin Currie, thank you so much for talking to us here on LBC, and congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
You begin it on January the 18th, 2022, yes, which is the day of your effective diagnosis with Parkinson's. I mean, it wasn't a formal diagnosis, but they were basically saying, we think you've got it. Yeah. And you write on that day, I decide I'm going to keep working, keep touring, keep playing, despite the uneasy feeling that another man is growing inside me, slowly seizing the means of control. What is the feeling like now when you look back on those words and that determination?
I'm actually better now than I was then, because when I received the pseudo-diagnosis, which went thus, I can't prove you've got Parkinson's, because if I do a brain scan, it won't show up. So I said, OK, so I'm walking out of here, and you're telling me you can't prove I've got Parkinson's, but you're not saying I don't have Parkinson's. He was like, that's exactly right. So at that point, you know, and I kind of knew already. I was strongly suspicious that that's what my symptoms were. So then I spent a year before they put me on the meds. So when I went in the following year, and the neurologist said, right, I'm going to put you on these pills. And I said, I didn't even know there were pills for Parkinson's. I thought they just said, see you later, good luck. You know, that's what I was expecting. So I was thrilled to find out there's medication, and then thrilled to find out that the meds worked for me. So I've had one step up in dose since then, but yeah, I'm actually better than I was then. I can play a bit better, and I can think a bit better, and I'm a bit more sociable than I was. So I feel slightly like a fraud, because when I got that diagnosis, I was pretty ill, and I'm sort of less ill now, and it's not getting worse very quickly, if that makes sense.
So absolutely determined to carry on performing, playing, recording, creating, hasn't put you off your step at all?
Well, I mean, Parkinson's is basically dopamine depletion, which is one of these neurotransmitters that does lots of different things, and it is quite involved with motivation. So actually I find it really hard to motivate myself to do anything like writing songs and recording demos and that kind of thing. So I have to force myself into situations where I've got to do things. So, you know, I'll book a house somewhere up north to write in, and then when I'm there I've got to work, because otherwise I'm very unmotivated. So there are things that impact that you have to find ways around, or you have to be aware of.
But you were motivated enough to write this?
Well, I've been writing tour blogs since about 28 maybe, and I found them a really useful way of killing time, and I felt that I was getting better and better at writing them. So actually, when we were about to go on the 2023 tour with Bare Naked Ladies for 3 months, our manager Andy said, look, why don't you stop publishing these on your website, and when you come home from the tour we can look at it and maybe we could turn it into a podcast or something. And then as soon as I came home with all those chapters, I thought it can only be a book. It doesn't make sense as anything else. So from that point on, then we got a publishing deal really quickly, which I was very surprised about, very pleased about. So then the second half of the book I wrote knowing it was going to be published, and that really motivated me as well. And I think the second half's better than the first half for that reason, because I was thinking, I'm a bit less sort of grumpy, and it's a bit less like a tour blog, the second half, because I started to think about a vague sort of structure for it. And so yes, I'm quite pleased with the second half, because I'm not a writer. I'm a songwriter, but I'm not a writer. I cannot write prose. But I felt like I did the best I could do in the second half, whereas not so much in the first. The first half's more like the kind of stuff I used to throw up my website every day.
I think anybody who reads this is going to say you can write prose, but let me ask you, because this is a book about so many different things. It is obviously about life on the road, and it has fascinating insights into that I want to ask you about in a second. But it is also about coming to terms with the fact that you have what you refer to as the ghastly affliction. And you named your tremor in your hand Gavin, and you described Gavin as a traitor who comes and goes and betrays any surge of adrenaline, any passing thought, like a spectre who suddenly appears as a mocking fool, parodying emotions, putting one's secret desires on public display. Do you still feel that way?
I wish I got you to read my audiobook. You didn't make one mistake there. I'd have made about 4 mistakes. Do I still feel that way? Yes. Because it is the tremor. I've got tremor dominant Parkinson's, whatever that means. I suppose it's self-explanatory. But the stress really switches it on. So if something happens in the morning, I get an email saying we've got to suddenly do something, I can't use my phone. It's just all over the place. So yes, it's a real betrayer, because it tells other people that I'm excited or I'm nervous. And they're also, if a football team's about to score a goal, it goes. If there's like a kissing scene in a film, it goes. It's quite embarrassing. So sometimes you have to kind of sit on it. And I've noticed actually other Parkinsonians being interviewed, they sort of put their arms behind them because you can be quite self-conscious about it. Because it is a real giveaway,
You write in the book that you're thankful that you live in an age when disease is no longer shameful or seen as divine punishment. But there's much embarrassment about it. People don't like shaking. You still finding that?
I mean, I guess, all the local shops that I go to now are used to it, and they probably know, because there's been quite a lot of publicity. I don't come across people that often that don't know. But now when I do, I just don't bother hiding it. I just go, sod it. If they can think because people generally think one of two things. They think you're either very nervous. So like if you're standing in a passport queue, for example, it's a bit of a concern, because you think they might read that as I'm hiding something. But the other thing people tend to assume is that you're an alkie. I've just given up caring. I just think, look, and it's also Parkinson's is so common now. I just assume that most people kind of know.
Now, you also write that you suffer from a second ghastly affliction, which is the determination to play, to get out there, to go on the road. You actually, the subtitle to the book is Life on the Road and Other Diseases.
The compulsion to, write songs and get on a stage is a sort of disease. It's not a terrible disease. I mean, it can be a terrible disease if you're awful, and I will eventually end up being awful, The disease will take away my voice, it will take away a lot of my sort of motion control. And the big question is, when do you stop? Do you have the courage to stop at the right time, or do you end up putting yourself into embarrassing situations? I already feel that sometimes now I'm putting myself into embarrassing situations. I think I shouldn't be doing this, but I am compelled to go on because it's the only thing I know. And these sorts of job's not the right word, but these sorts of compulsions it's a drive, you've kind of got to do it. So, okay, I'm driven to do this, I can't do it as well as I used to do it, but I can find ways of adapting to it and enjoying the fact it's a bit different, I guess, and that might be a massive rationalisation, because I really don't want to stop, and I know it's going to make me stop. And so there's a kind of battle going on between that finish line and what I do before that finish line.
But have you really at times thought that maybe you are approaching the finish line? Because I've seen you now live on numerous occasions in various parts of the world, and since the diagnosis nobody walks away from your gigs going, oh, old Justin's really got to start thinking about hanging it up. I mean, are you too self-critical, do you think?
Well, I mean, anybody that performs has to be very critical and aware of what they're doing wrong and what they're doing right, or otherwise you'll really make a fool of yourself, I think. I find myself on stage quite a lot going, I can't do this anymore, I can't do this anymore. But when I get to the end of the gig and I go to the dressing room with the band and everybody's happy, I think, whew, that was great, you know. But in the moment, it can be quite difficult because you're fighting little losses of control that aren't there naturally anymore, and you have to sing slightly differently. So that internal monologue is constantly getting at you, which may also be a function just of the disease itself, just because it's a mental disease as much as a physical disease, the way, as far as I can tell.
So talk to me about life on the road, because this is, I was thinking today, it's almost sort of Hunter S. Thompson in its exposition of life on the road. You do a lot of killing time. You say we're all just burning up the hours till action stations. You walk a lot. You eat an unbelievable amount of, especially in the United States, quite bad food. You listen to music, you read, you shop in thrift stores, you visit an amazing array of museums and art galleries.
Sounds like a holiday.
I know what I was going to say. And then you come back and play a gig, and you read this and you go, well, that doesn't sound like an affliction, it sounds like a charmed life.
Yeah, and it absolutely is a charmed life. I think at one point I say that one of the great privileges of it is you end up with an access all areas pass in some of the most amazing historical buildings in the world, you know, wandering around the rafters of some, 150-year-old theatre or whatever, or amazing amphitheatre. And also on that tour, because we were third on the bill, we didn't have to sound check until 6 o'clock. We were on stage at 7:30. We only played for 40 minutes maximum. And then, so you had an awful lot of free time. And if we were in a city, then most of us were going out and doing some sort of cultural things and doing some shopping or whatever. So actually, those tours are sort of bliss in a way, but they're also, I don't know if creatively is the right word, but they're not really succor for the soul in any sense, because you're not playing to your audience. People are drifting in piecemeal as you start. And they're a wee bit soul-destroying, and a lot of the venues are not near a cultural centre, especially in America. Europe's a lot better for that, actually, because you can usually get a train somewhere. The United States, you can be very isolated doing these larger venues because they're out of town, and it's going to be $60 in a taxi to get anywhere, no public transport. So I think that's why there's a lot of whinging, or I whinge a lot in the first half of the book. Also, on that tour, my girlfriend had had a stroke, and I couldn't really speak to her on the phone, so I didn't have that outlet. So I was, and also I don't drink on the road as well, so you can get into a situation where if the rest of the band are having a couple of beers after the gig, you can be quite isolated, which is quite tricky.
You mentioned the sort of awful synchronicity of you being diagnosed with Parkinson's disease and the love of your life, who you refer to in the book as my love, also facing a stroke that has left her in full-time care. You've got a wonderful line in the book about care homes. You call the facility in which she is housed now a jail exclusively populated by the falsely convicted. The staff are without fail of sunny of disposition and sympathetic. And I wonder, at the end of a year in which the future of healthcare in the UK has been very, very heavily discussed, and particularly the future of the caring arts, social care, has been discussed, and knowing that at some point you, I mean we all, but any of us, might need that kind of assistance, you must have a sort of a fairly unique perspective on the importance of that area of society and what ought to be done to strengthen it.
Yeah, I mean, especially with an ageing population. Well, I mean, look, they've been talking, I mean, all the major parties have been talking about integrating care with the NHS for years, and I've not, as far as I can tell, really not done anything about it. I mean, it strikes me that more than half of what will need to be done in the future is around care rather than A&E and acute medicine, I mean, that's really where we're all going to end up, because we're all going to live far too long. And the problem is there's not going to be anybody to take care of us. It's one of these massive problems, they have it in Japan, we have it in Europe now, that most politicians seem terrified to address it because it's so insurmountable. And of course it means saying the unsayable, which is raising taxes, and raising taxes on people like me, raising taxes on the relatively rich. And the fact that you can't stand on a political platform that says we're going to significantly raise taxes on the top 50% of earners, or the top 30% of earners, or whatever, is ludicrous, because that's the only way you're going to pay for this stuff, is by raising income tax. It just drives me insane, And I mean, and for purely selfish reasons, I don't want to be in a situation where there's been no more investment put into health and care, and I end up in some, appalling shack. It's an appalling shack because nobody's looked after it, so it's that's all a bit frightening.
All a bit frightening for Justin Currie, and for the rest of us, I suspect. We're going to be hearing more from Justin Currie after the break, and then I want to hear from you. If you've been dealing this year with a relatively new diagnosis, doesn't have to be Parkinson's, could be something else, and if Justin Currie's story resonates with you, we'd love to hear about it. And of course, I suspect that many of you are up for his suggestion of taxing the rich to improve care facilities across the UK. And as he said there, that would mean higher taxes on himself, because he counts himself as being one of the wealthier members of our society, and he's up for it. And it seems extraordinary to me that he's still not being asked to pay more for something that he and many other people in that category of wealth, I think, probably would be like Justin Currie and willing to pay for. So you can call us at 0345 6060973. You can text us at 84850, or you can ask Alexa to send a comment to LBC about what you've heard in that first part of the interview from Justin Currie. We've got more from Justin Currie to come. The time on LBC, 8:20.
This is LBC. Simon Marks on LBC. Call 0345 6060973.
What is your view on whether there ought to be higher level of taxes imposed on the wealthy in order to improve the caring arts in this country? As we were hearing from Justin Currie, the lead singer of Amitri, just before the break, he is arguing fervently for that, based on the experience that he and his partner have had over the last year plus, all of which is related in his book, The Tremolo Diaries, which for my money is the best book I have read all year. It describes in detail his own year plus living with Parkinson's disease. It also describes in detail life of it on the road, some of it in the United States, a country to which Justin and his colleagues in Amitri are no strangers. And I put it to him that in the book, he comes across as being equally beguiled by America and repulsed by it.
I'm not repulsed by it. And I love America, and I love my American friends. I love Americans. I mean, they're very open Americans. I have to reiterate that before we first went to America in 1986, we had a very typical kind of snotty-nosed attitudes that Americans, this sort of land of the stupid, everything's stupid, the TV shows are stupid, and, forgetting, of course, all these amazing novels you've read and amazing movies you've seen. But when we went there in 86, we stayed with real people. We went on a tour bus, we were in a little van, we were staying at fans' parents' houses, we met people from all walks of life, and the hospitality was extraordinary, and we just fell in love with these people. But there's a terrible homogeneity to the States. You go from, you can be in North Carolina in the kind of sultry, leafy zone, and then a few days later you're in New Mexico, and there are lots of fascinating differences in that but also there's an awful lot of things that are exactly the same, which is really odd, because you don't really get that in Britain, let alone in continental Europe. So that does grind you down a bit. It's just everything looks the same. It's the same bloody shops. I mean, I know there's an element of that in Britain now, and it can be really hard finding proper local food. In fact, you need to go ethnic. The best food I had in the States on that 2022 tour, actually, after we came off stage, nowhere was open. We were on a little high street, and I went over to this restaurant that had shut, but I went in with my Scottish accent, and they very kindly, they hadn't quite shut the kitchen, they very kindly made me some food, and they were Honduran. And they said, right, we'll just make you 3 Honduran dishes and you can go and take them to the bus. And honestly, that's some of the best food I've ever had in years, But it's really hard to find those places,
Right, and it did occur to me, as I read the book, against the backdrop of everything that's been happening in the United States this year, that you love those ethnic, hole-in-the-wall places to hang out. And I wonder if anything that's happened in the United States over the last 11 months makes you less interested in returning to America.
A lot of people are not interested in going to America during this administration. We missed the first administration, so we were only there when Biden was in office. The first thing that I noticed post-Trump's first term was we went to the West Coast, we did the Jimmy Kimmel show, we're up and down the West Coast, and I never really noticed this divide that Trump really opened up or exaggerated or made worse in the States between the coasts and the more rural states, I guess. So that was all fine, and I was wearing a mask everywhere I went because it was still quite early in opening up post-COVID. So I wore a mask in all public places. It was still mandatory in quite a lot of places then, in California especially, but Oregon as well, and Washington, a lot of mask wearing. And then we went to Idaho, and I went into, quite a sort of trendy supermarket, one of the, Trader Joe's or, what's that rootsy one called? Anyway, and I was wearing a mask, and the looks of hatred that greeted me were astounding. Completely the opposite to any experience I'd ever had in the States before, where people are super friendly. As soon as they hear your accent, where are you from? They hated me. They identified me immediately as some coastal liberal who was virtue signalling by wearing a mask, not trying to protect them from getting a very serious infection. And that really blew the top of my head off. I'd never seen that before, and I found it very troubling. And I overheard some conversations that I would never have overheard before. But at the same time, in all those out-of-the-way places, there were BLM posters everywhere. And I thought that black people were far more visible and looked far less intimidated on the streets than they had done prior to BLM. So I thought, in one way there'd been a really positive motion in the right direction, and in other ways there'd been a sort of terrible shift to the, not even to the right, just a kind of reactionary, fearful kind of state of thinking. Very strange, and it looked to me like in those kinds of places, white people look scared, and the people from the black community that formerly would have looked very edgy were looking much more relaxed. Very odd.
But when you say there's lots of talk within your acquaintances within the music industry and your friends about people saying they don't currently want to return to the United States, do you count yourself in that current position?
I'd be nervous about going. I wouldn't. I mean, I'm no longer on social media, so and also it's exaggerated how many people actually have their phones looked into and all that sort of stuff. But it could still happen. It's happened to some traditional musicians who were sent home because of some statement they made on social media or something. But yeah, if I got offered something, of course I would go, because I love America and I love Americans. But I'm not unhappy that we've not been there while while Trump's been in office, because it seems like a different atmosphere, you know.
And do you get involved at all in sort of the politics of Parkinson's? I know there's that Movers and Shakers group that Rory Kettle-Jones and I think Jeremy Paxman have been involved in, and the Parky Charter. There was a parliamentary debate about their desire for the government to recruit more neurologists, to equal out what they say is an unequal approach to Parkinson's compared to example, to cancer.
I feel like I've had really great treatment. They were a bit short of Parkinson's nurses initially, so I didn't see a Parkinson's nurse for a while. And then I saw this brilliant nurse who was just retiring. But there's another 2 nurses now that I see. They're really helpful, Parkinson's nurses. You see them twice a year, and you know, they ask you questions, and they kind of monitor the progress of your disease, and they've got loads of advice. But I've heard people complain about finding it very hard to find Parkinson's nurses. I've been fine. Maybe it's just where I live. I don't know. I'm not much of a joiner. I've only joined one political party in my life, and I left shortly afterwards because I found it was so horrendously middle class, it made me sick. And I'm very reticent about getting involved in these sorts of things. I've been asked, and I don't know. You know, because I'm not that ill, I do feel a bit fraudulent, and I don't want to, in any way, to be a spokesperson. It's much easier for me to talk to my fellow Parkinsonians who are at the same stage. Although on that book tour, I spoke to 2 or 3 absolutely charming, slightly older men, maybe 5-10 years older than me, who were much further down that, you know, in the Parkinson's process. But they were really encouraging as well. And you can sort of, even though physically they were much more visibly affected, once you got talking to them, you could tell they were all in there. And one of my biggest fears was I initially felt like it was stealing my personality. And that was, in fact, I was convinced it was stealing my personality. And I've softened a bit on that now. Whether either I'm adapting to it or I'm just, you know, I've gotten over being so freaked out about it. And again, the medications have helped. But meeting those older guys in the book tour has been incredibly encouraging.
So as you look forward to 2026, what is on Justin Currie and Del Amitri's docket for the next year?
My docket is I've written a bunch of songs, and Ian and I have written a few songs. We need to write more, and I've just finally, after an awful lot of prevarication, I've got around to starting to record them. So I'll need to carry on that process next year, record as much as possible. Hopefully have a Del Amici album finished, quite a long Del Amici album. We're thinking about doing 2 records. Hopefully have it finished for May or something. So yes, the first half of the year I need to really focus on that, because the book's been a really welcome distraction, but I'm terrible at, even without Parkinson's, I'm terrible at concentrating on 2 things at once. I have to be, right, I'm doing an album. I'm not going to do a gig for 6 months. I'm doing an album. So the book thing really prevented me from starting that. But I have started.
Which I think is great news. That was Justin Currie, author of The Tremolo Diaries. It's published by New Modern Books. And he was talking to me earlier in the week about his life with Parkinson's and his life on the road. And if that struck a chord with you, give us a call. Have you spent the year dealing perhaps with an unwelcome diagnosis, or worrying, as Justin Currie does, about the state of care in the UK and the funding that is available to it? What do you think of his suggestion that there shouldn't even be a real debate about the fact that it is time to tax the wealthy? He counts himself as one of them, to pay for salvaging the country's crumbling healthcare system, and particularly its social care system. I'm also interested to know how you reacted to his comments there about travelling to the United States. He says he would go, but he'd be worried about it. What is your view on travel to the United States at the end of this tumultuous first year of Donald Trump's second term, and now the new threats to require you, for example, to provide 5 years of your social media history to the American authorities in order to secure the ESTA that you need to travel visa-free to America. I think there's just a lot to talk about that comes out of that interview, but particularly if, like Justin Currie, you've spent the year, and in his case longer than a year now, adapting to life with what is for him going to be a lifelong disease. I would be very interested, if you're willing to share your story, to tell us how that adaptation has taken place in your life. You can call us at 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. You can ask Alexa to send a comment to LBC.